Good morning, everyone. This is Julie McDonald with Microcom Technologies, and I'd like to thank all of you for attending today's webinar with Aruba Instant On. Today's host is Reggie Johnson, and he is their systems engineer for North America, and he'll be presenting today. If anyone has any questions, please submit them in the question box, and Reggie will answer them at the end of today's presentation. Reggie, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm finished for now. Please go ahead and take it on over.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Julie. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I hope everybody's doing okay. So I'm Reggie Johnson, as Julie said, Channel Systems Engineer for Aruba. Today, I'm going to talk to you guys about an exciting new product that we got. It's our Aruba Instant On 1430 Switch Series. But before we get started, I'm going to talk about, for the agenda, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the small business trends and some of the opportunities. And kind of from that, you'll kind of get some idea about where I'm going to position this particular product, where it fits in our portfolio, where it fits in the networking environment in general. Then I'm going to talk about the 1430 switches themselves, the series. There are actually 7 switches within that series. I'll go through those at a very high level. And then I'm going to cover some of the use cases around those switches, where they might actually fit in the network in various types of environments. And then I'll talk a little bit about the warranty and support services that we offer. And then at the end, I'll cover some Q&A. So let's talk a little bit about small business trends. And I know a lot of you guys sell into that SMB marketplace, so a lot of this is what you're familiar with. You know, in terms of technology, remote workers, and really IT in that small business space really being a DIY type of culture, right? A do-it-yourself type of culture. Everybody's kind of gotten really gotten to the understanding that for the most part, you know, even if they're not technology savvy, they need to be a little technology savvy. I mean, we're all dealing with it every day, and the small businesses are using it more and more and implementing it in various areas. And now we're at the point where a lot of us are actually working from home. So from a remote worker standpoint, sometimes it requires actually getting devices where you have to do some basic installation yourself, right? That's what I was talking about from a DIY perspective. And you see from the graph over on the right, it talks about various environments and where it's most likely that you might have that DIY culture. So for that reason, it's important for us as we develop products that are for small businesses and home offices to have technology that's as simple as possible, right? So really that, you know, I like this, the little tag down at the bottom where it says technology plus home office plus DIY basically is plug and play switching, right? And that's what we're going to talk about. So, and then in addition to that, a lot of the traditional devices that we used to see a lot more of in the enterprise environment that supported things like PoE, such as phone and access points and security cameras, right? We now have those at home or in smaller offices as well as things such as retail, point of sale service devices, and smart light, things such as smart lighting. So there's that requirement for power over Ethernet. So at one time, now what the product I'm going to talk to you guys about today is an unmanaged switch, but it was really interesting years ago when PoE first started being offered. That tells you how long I've been in the industry. It was a long time ago, right? So when PoE was first offered, they used to talk about the fact you'd never have an unmanaged switch that supported PoE because you couldn't determine the power budget, et cetera. Well, I'm here to tell you that that's no longer true and actually hasn't been true for quite some time. We'll talk about one of those actually being on the 1430 that I'm going to talk about right now. And notice this says 1430 unmanaged switch series. So if you look at our total instant on end-to-end solution, and I've covered many of these products with you guys in the past, you know, those products have been around, whether or not it was the access points or the switches that you see here. They were managed switches or access points that were managed in our cloud, right, as a part of our portal. And we could manage them using a single pane of glass and do configuration. And there were software updates, and you could see a topology view and do remote management, et cetera. And there were some things that happened automatically. Well, this is a new product that we've come out with that doesn't have a requirement for any of those things. It's truly an unmanaged switch. It cannot be managed in our cloud. In some cases, it may be an extension to an environment that has some of these products there, or perhaps it's just a small environment where it's just there and it's, the customer, or maybe it's a home environment, and they didn't need or want to manage the product further than just basically plugging it in. And basically, if there was anything on the network that was handing out IP addresses to clients, then so be it. It literally, these unmanaged switches just become a data pass through, and that's it. So no configuration or management required with the 1430 switches. And I'll show you some examples later of use cases in which that's the case. So as I've said, so with that, we're really expanding our portfolio. Now, if you look at the previous products I've talked about with you guys in the past, where there was the 1930, which is kind of our flagship product for the Instant On product portfolio, or the 1960, which came later, which was kind of a stackable version of the 1930, and then the 1830, which I just talked about last time with you guys, has a very basic management feature set, so more of an entry-level management product, but they are all managed products, right? So that were cloud managed, or they could be managed via the local GUI. The 1430, as I said, it's totally unmanaged, configuration-free gigabit switch that you just plug and play, and it's ideal for that small office, home office type of environment. Our differentiators, obviously there are a lot of vendors that play in that unmanaged switch space, but our differentiator is really our warranty and support that we offer with our Instant On product. Now, if you look at these products, the other products along with the 1430, they were all replacements of a product set that we had before, which was referred to as Office Connect. So this is a direct replacement for the Office Connect 1405 and the 1420 series of products. And on this page, it actually shows a translation. So if you actually have any customers that had the Office Connect products, the 1405s or the 1420 switches, as you can see on the left, there were 11 models. We were able to combine kind of some features and functionality on some of those and get those down to 7 models supported in the 1430. And you can kind of see, this is a great chart to use for conversion if you happen to have customers that have been buying these other products, right? You can transfer them right over to the 1430. Now, there are a few differences. In some cases, we no longer have a 32-watt PoE model. We have just a 64-watt PoE model, as you can see here, to replace those couple of models there, the 5-port and the 8-port. And then we kind of this similar we no longer have a 24-port PoE model. We now have a 16-port PoE model. Same budget for PoE. That's the one on the very bottom there. But it doesn't have as large of a port count. So there's some little differences there. And then right above that, if you look at JH018A, that was actually one of the switches we had in the 1420 portfolio that had support for SFP+. So you could actually put 10 gig transceivers in there. So you notice I got it highlighted in red that we do not support 10 gig in the 1430 switches that we transitioned to. And what we found is there just really wasn't a need for a marketplace for that with an unmanaged switch. It was a very small marketplace that had that requirement. So now we just have gigabit uplinks on that product. But this is a great chart to use for that transition. Now, with the 1430 switch series, as I mentioned, so there's 7 unmanaged products. These are basic layer 2 switches. We talked about the formats: 5-port, 8-port, 16-port, 24-port. And there's a 26-port, which is actually a 28-port. There's another, some uplinks that actually don't disable the other 2 Ethernet ports. So actually, all 28 ports can function. We'll talk a little bit further about that. But up to 124 ports of PoE, depending upon which switch you've got in order to power those phones, cameras, access points, etc. We talked about the fact it's plug and play with no configuration and management. These are also Class B certified for the home, meaning that they won't, and that's on the 5-port and the 8-port. So that's important because that means it won't interfere with your TV and your radio and other devices there that you have in the home. So that's why that Class B certification is important. There's some other basic features that are a part of these switches as well that we've actually built into it that I'll talk about. They are just a part of the base switch software. They're not configurable or manageable, so there's no way you can actually upgrade these, but there are some things that we actually built in. And these are fanless units and energy efficient. The fan helps with that energy efficiently, or the lack of a fan, I should say, helps with that energy efficiency. But also with these being fanless, it's nice that you can have them on a desk or in your environment. They don't make so much noise. I've actually got some switches here. You guys can't hear them in my office. I've grown accustomed to the noise. It's become white noise for me. But for some people that aren't used to that, that can be very annoying to have something that has a fan in it running. Remember, I talked about these are primary small office, home office. These are fanless, so they're perfect for that type of environment. So we talked about the different models, which you can see here over on the right, and that's exactly what they look like there. But I mentioned there are also some features that actually come built into these units. Now, some of the other stuff here is pretty basic, right? So obviously we've got fixed gigabit ports on each one of these. They're auto MDI, MDI-X, so you can use a crossover or a regular straight through cable, and they're going to work with connecting with whatever they're connecting to. A couple of the more advanced features, though, that we built in as a part of this is something called spanning tree BPDU forwarding, right? Essentially, what that does is actually prevents loops in the network. So sometimes, you get some unmanaged switches that aren't able to make those detections or don't forward that traffic. So it could potentially cause some networking issues. I've actually seen this with customers in the past that bought unmanaged switches that didn't have support for that. So we're supporting it here. One of the other things here, you see the 802.1x EAPOL. So that's for if you got clients doing 802.1 authentication on the network. So we do that with our 1930 and 1960 switches. We're able to pass that traffic or actually send traffic to be authenticated to a radius server on the network. Well, if you don't have an unmanaged switch in between that doesn't recognize that type of traffic, it won't send it. So we're actually, with these switches, we're actually able to recognize that it's an authentication protocol for authentication being passed to that authentication server on the network, and we're able to forward that traffic where it needs to go. And then there's some basic things around quality of service, so being able to recognize voice and video and things like that with default queues that are already built into these switches. So again, some enhanced features that are built in as a part of the offering within the 1430 switch series, unmanaged switch series. So, and this is another great chart that really shows the 1430 in comparison to some of the other products within the Aruba Instant On portfolio. Obviously, the key differences being unmanaged. All of the models within the 1430 are fanless, as we talked about. So, within the other products, there are some fanless products within those parts of those portfolios as well. But a couple of the key things that I really wanted to point out here is the actual use cases and where they fit, right? So remember here, we're targeting small businesses, home office, and then, those are the ideal deployments. However, with these other products, you can kind of see what the recommendations are there for ideal deployment. There are cases, though, where maybe somebody wants to take a 1430 for a billing department where they've got maybe a few printers, maybe a few PCs in that environment, and just use it as an extension off of a managed environment. That capability exists as well. And I'll show you some examples of that where you'll see a 1430 paired with perhaps like a 1930 or some of the other switches within an environment. So this is a great page really showing some model configuration differences. So the ones that I don't have highlighted are the basic non-PoE versions. And then the others, I've got the 2 PoE versions highlighted. Notice I've got the fact that there are 8 ports of PoE supported on the 8-port model and 16 ports supported on the 16-port model. The reason I highlighted that is that's very important because if some of you guys may remember when I talked about the 1830 last time, is the 1830 supports what we refer to as partial PoE. So if it had 24 ports of PoE, only the first 12 ports on that switch actually would support PoE. Same way if there were 8 and you only had the first 4 that supported PoE. With these, it doesn't matter which port you actually plug a device into. It's going to give it power based on the allotted power budget available, and that's for any of the ports on those switches, and that's why that's important. So there's no partial PoE support. And, a lot of customers I found actually hate that partial PoE thing because that means they have to plan for their, not to use those first 12 or the first half of the ports on that particular switch. And then there's the 26 port, gig model, which also has 2 SFP uplink connections on it, and that's for 1 gig connections only, as I mentioned earlier. And those can actually be functional along with the 26 ports at the same time, so they don't disable. So in some cases, they disable the other Ethernet ports. Not the case here. You could have 2 additional fiber ports there, or perhaps 2 Ethernet ports. So with that, we've actually got branded transceivers now for the Instant On line of products. These are the 1 gig models that are supported on the 1430 26G model. Our transceivers actually have 1-year warranty. These are very well priced for the Instant On switches. Before, we were trying to use our enterprise transceivers, which, in some cases, the transceiver could cost as much or more than the switch, so not necessarily a good fit there. So we came back and we now have developed some Aruba Instant On branded transceivers that are appropriately priced and function great. So with these switches, and I'm going to talk about this in a few minutes here, but there's a 3 or 5 year foundation care service or support that you can actually add to the switches, and that would actually cover or extend the coverage of the transceivers if that's the case too, if you migrate to 5 years. Now, the hardware replacement, if that's required for the transceivers, that's going to be a 10 days from a hardware replacement to get a transceiver. But notice there's a 1 gig, a regular 1 gig copper option, and then there's also a 1 gig short haul fiber option that's available as well. The fiber option obviously is for extending the network. Perhaps you got another building or perhaps another room that's further than that 100 meters that you can extend that over copper. Then fiber is the way to go. And as I mentioned, we support that on the 1430 26G. Also included with the 5-port and 8-port models, both the 5-port and the 8-port PoE as well, is an external power supply. And so you can see there for North America, you can see what it looks like. It actually has a small connector on the end. I've actually got a 5-port switch sitting here on my desk. It's actually like a little smaller than my hand, actually. It's a very small one. And then that same external power adapter is used for the 5-port and the 8-port, and then non-PoE. And then the PoE model actually uses that brick that you see over on the right along with the power cord. So, always when it's possible, we try to avoid having those bricks. But in the case of needing additional power to power PoE devices off of the 8-port, there's a requirement for the brick. So, and this is just a great chart, really showing, the differences in the models from a feature set standpoint, keeping in mind that the 1430s unmanaged, so you get, obviously the basic connectivity, some basic quality of service, as well as some of those additional built-in features that I talked about. I talked about the 1 gig only uplink, and that's only on the 26G model of the 1430, right? And then there's support for class 4 PoE, which is the 30-watt standard, right? So obviously, there's no support for the class 6, which is the 60-watt standard. And in order to actually get that in Instant On at all, you'd have to go to the 1960 model. But when you think about the environment that these fit in, typically what's there, the AT support, for 30-watt PoE is definitely plenty. Keep in mind with PoE, right, that it's backwards compatible as well, right, as you move from the different standards. If you have a device that supports 15 watts, you can plug it into a BT 60-watt port and it'll only use that 15 watts. So in terms of use case topology, so as I mentioned, this ideal for small office, home office with the 1430. Obviously the difference in the various models is going to make a difference there. So once you get into more of a business environment, you're probably looking at something with a larger port count options. Here's some great use case topologies to kind of share with you guys on how this could be positioned. So here's an example of a small office. Here I've got a 1430/16 port with PoE. Notice I've even got our AP11 connected, right, in that particular environment. So we're still able to have it in that environment connected, actually receiving power off of our 1430. We're just not going to be able to see it, so if this was being cloud managed, and I were cloud managing the AP11, I could see it and I could see clients basically connect on the network, but I'm not going to see that 1430 because it's an unmanaged switch, right? So that's the one thing that you need to make your customers aware of. If they're looking for that complete end-to-end cloud management, then they need to have a managed switch in that environment. Here's a similar solution that's using, that's a work from home scenario, but the only real difference here, so we've got a couple of more access points, but then we're only using an eight port PoE switch, for wired connectivity, because we probably don't need as much wired connectivity within that particular home environment. Here's another example similar to that where we've got a small cafe. There's an 16 port PoE model with an AP15 connected. So keep in mind with our APs, as they kind of move up in number, it's generally more support for more spatial streams and support for more users, more devices that can actually connect to that device. So the AP15 is one of our Wi-Fi 5 access points that typically is like ideal in this type of environment. In this case, it's a small cafe. There's a small clinic. Notice you've got multiple rooms with access points in each room. We've got those connected off of a 1930. However, this is one of the examples I talked about. So maybe I just want to extend it with a lower cost product, perhaps for billing computers or printers in a particular room or area. In this case, it looks like it's the reception area. So now I'm just putting a 1435 port non-PoE model there because I don't need PoE in that particular area, and I'm providing access for those clients to the network as well that way. So warranty options, I talked about the warranty. So there's a limited lifetime warranty on these unmanaged switches as well. And then you've got next business day ship if there's something wrong with the product. If you get it, obviously with these, if you plug it in and it's not working, you'll need to send it back. Within the first 30 days, we'll actually send you one right back out to you within the first 30 days. We'll send it the next day. After that, then it's no committed arrival date. Typically, it's like, I think it's within like between 10 and 30 days. So what you'd actually want to have is actually, if you got the foundation care service, it basically gives you an uplift on that, and you would actually get that product next business day. And then there are 3 or 5 year options for foundation care, and that varies depending upon the model of the switch. And then everything else gets extended as well. So for the first 90 days, you only get 24/7 phone support. But if you have foundation care service, then that's for the life of the product. And chat support, it was already for the life of the product. And then there is no software on these unmanaged switches, so that's not an issue there. And then the transceiver and the DAC warranty, as I mentioned, is 3 years on the transceivers. Obviously extended if you get foundation care. And then I talked about the hardware replacement for the transceivers being 10 days. So why Aruba Instant On 1430 switches? Well, it really comes down to, we talked about the simplicity of these really being true plug and play. You literally just plug them in. So, I talked about them working in an existing Aruba environment, right, with our products, but obviously we don't really care if it's a standard switch within somebody else's environment, will work there as well. I talked about some of the built-in advanced features around spanning tree and preventing loops, as well as radius authentication, being able to pass that traffic, and the energy efficiency. These have great performance. So these are gigabit across the board. These also support gigabit jumbo frames. You can kind of tie that into that advanced feature support. So for larger packets that may come through the network, depending upon the applications that are run, that's important. We talked about the number of different models and the support for PoE Plus. There are no hidden fees with Instant On, so these obviously still adhere to that. We also say the same thing with our managed switches, being that even if you're managing those in the cloud, that we don't charge a subscription fee for that. There's no software updates with this particular product, so really adds to that level of simplicity. And then I talked about the lifetime warranty. And, this is coming from a trusted vendor, right? So it's Aruba. We're not some rinky-dink, no-name vendor, right, that's actually putting a product out there that may or may not work. We back it 100%. We have an outstanding community that's able to support it. And if necessary, you can get somebody on the phone and talk to somebody about it. Or if you don't want to do that, you can actually, you can send a chat message as well for support. So it's a lot of different options for being able to get assistance when required. And that's pretty much it, Julie. I covered quite a bit. I had more to talk about on these unmanaged switches than I thought I would.
Hey, Reggie, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. Yeah, and definitely it looks like I've got some questions here for you. Let's get started with the first one. And, you touched on this, but it still was a question asked, and maybe you can expand on it just a little. Someone asked, are all ports PoE powered or just portions of them? I know you touched on that, but maybe you could address it a little further.
No problem. Glad to address that again, Julie. So yes, so all ports are able to be powered by PoE. So no support, and there's no partial PoE support with these products, and that's a big deal. And one thing I talked about when I mentioned this is a lot of customers I know don't like that, right? They hate the partial PoE because that means they got to plan around which ports they use. Not the case with the products in the 1430 series that support PoE. Now you do obviously have a smaller power budget than you would have on a lot of switches, right? But typically sufficient for the environment that they're going.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Reggie. Next question here for you. Are the switches smart switches?
No, they're not. They have, like I said, they do have a level of intelligence that we built in, but they're not smart switches or smart managed switches. They are literally plug and play. You plug them in and they work. They don't even take an IP address. So if you got clients connecting to them, those clients are going to get an IP address from a DHCP server or a gateway, and that switch is just going to be a basic layer 2 data pass through.
Very good, thanks. Next question here for you, Reggie. Are the warranties processed directly with you, meaning Aruba Instant On, or with the partner that is purchased from? I believe you did talk about this as well, but that was the question.
Yep, no problem. Great question. So the warranty is from us, Aruba, as Aruba. So and you're talking about like the service and support, it can actually, if you're talking about the support, the foundation care, then that's going to be purchased from the normal means, whether or not you're buying from a partner or from a distributor. You can purchase the warranty for the actual hardware, the service for the actual hardware through them. The warranty comes with the product. That's part of the product. We back that. The support is us as the support mechanism. But if you're buying support for the product, you're going to buy that through the means that you've been purchasing it, that you purchase the product, which is through a distributor or through a partner. I hope I
Thank you,
didn't
Reggie. Next.
add. If they did,
Oh, no problem.
later, let me know.
Thanks, Reggie. Next question here for you. Regarding hardware replacement in 10 days, what does that mean? Because you talked about hardware replacement within 30 days and so on and so forth. Can you touch a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so in terms of, so if it's just a product that's typically covered under warranty, like with the switches, within the first 30 days after purchase, we'll do a next business day ship of the product back out to you, meaning that you'll get it within a couple days. Um, if that's it, and once you get beyond that, if that product, particularly if that switch is not under warranty, right, then I mean, if you haven't purchased service allows you to continue that for the life of your um, for the life of that service, whether or not it's 3 year or 5 years. So what we'll actually do is the next business actually we'll ship it out that day and you receive the product the next day. If that's not the case and it's just warranty, right, then under warranty you're going to have a waiting period. So it could be 10 days before you actually receive the replacement product, right? So the benefit of actually having the foundation care service is the fact that, particularly if you're running a business, you're going to be able to get a product to replace that product within the next day or two, as opposed to if you're just under warranty, then you're going to have to wait longer, right? It could be 10 days, it could be 30 days. There's no committed time frame, right? So that's the benefit of you guys adding service onto the sale of these switches. And it's a really low cost, right? When you think about the additional benefits and what you get. Same thing with phone support. You get it for the first 90 days, right? After purchase. But if you want to continue that phone support, you need to buy the 3 year or 5 year service. That way you can have phone support for the life of that product. If not, then you're just relying upon chat. And that's not sufficient for a lot of people.
Understood. Thank you very much for all of that. You talked about support and perhaps talking to somebody or sending a chat message. If we go to your website, obviously we can find technical support. Would that also include customer support and anything in that nature?
Yes, and matter of fact, you can find those support information right on the page that you guys are looking at right now. Assuming I'm still sharing my screen, Julie. I am still sharing, right?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so yeah, community.instanton.com is where you can kind of go to like a help page and you can ask questions there and actually get support or responses from people like me in some cases that actually work at Aruba or the support team. They actually monitor that as well. Or you can go, if you're using the management portal, right, you can actually go over to the right and actually click on the support options there. Or you can go to ArubaInstantOn.com/support, shown down here at the very bottom on this screen. And actually, it'll give you all of the contact phone numbers, et cetera, in order to get additional assistance.
Thank you for that, Reggie. One last question regarding the switches, the towers. Are they tower switches and IP67 rated?
No, they say, are they power switches?
Oh, tower with a T.
That's not a term I'm familiar with in terms of switches. I'm familiar with that term in terms of servers. But and they're not IP67 rated, right? So these are not rugged devices. These are really designed for normal indoor environments, because I assume with that they're asking if they're dust-proof, waterproof, etc. We do have a ruggedized product. That's the Aruba 4100 I product that comes in various configurations, but that's not a part of the Aruba Instant On portfolio.
Gotcha. Thank you, though, for all of that clarification, Reggie, and thank you. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Julie. And I was just going to say, and I think some of those may fit the description of what you're referring to as a tower switch as well, because they are kind of, some of those do kind of look that way, and you can rack them, rack mount them. You know, somehow I feel like the Tory Stellar here. So you can actually rack mount those in a way in which you know, in various directions depending. So I think they kind of fit that description of what's being asked about the tower format. Sorry, long answer, Julie.
No problem, Reggie. Thank you so much for answering all of those questions for us today. And thank you to everyone attending today's webinar. And if anyone winds up having any further questions, of course, please feel free to contact your sales rep or email us at sales@microcomtech.com. And if you wish to view any of the products mentioned or shown here today, please visit us at www.microcom.us. And of course, please remember, this webinar presentation has been recorded and will be uploaded to our Microcom YouTube channel so you can view it again. Reggie, my friend, thank you so much from all of you folks at Aruba Instant On. Until next time, until our next webinar, I greatly appreciate it. And thank you to everybody again. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Julie. Thank you, guys. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.